And everything. There we go. I think we are live. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we are live. It's 2:30 p.m. It's a Wednesday afternoon. You're watching Innovation Fika with me, Donny, here, as always, on LinkedIn and YouTube primarily, but today also on Twitter and Facebook, as I can see. I'm actually live from Riyadh in Saudi Arabia from a conference, the Social Innovation Forum here in Riyadh. And I'm actually joined by two panelists, speakers, keynote speakers from the conference. And I'm super happy to have them here. As you all know, this is a weekly Wednesday afternoon coffee break show. Fika in Swedish means coffee break. So we're having an innovation coffee break every Wednesday. All of the recordings go on YouTube. All of the written content that I write almost daily on LinkedIn goes on my Medium page. So check that one out as well. But enough about me. Let's jump straight into our, as I call it, the fastest half an hour in the world. Okay, so here we go. And to my right, we have Lisa M. Coleman from
Hello.
NYU.
Hello, everyone.
Wonderful to have
Pleasure.
you here. Just go like this. Sorry
All
about
right.
that.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
I'm excited to be here at the Social Innovation Conference. Looking forward to this conversation. I'm at New York University. I'm the Senior Vice President for Global Inclusion and Strategic Innovation, and my faculty appointment is in the business school. And we're going to talk all things innovation, social, and how. And for me, I'm going to talk about some of these emerging leaders and new generations. So now I'll turn it over to Professor Jackson.
Oh, and then we have Professor Jack Sim on my other hand from Singapore.
Yes. Uh, so for me, I'm the founder of the World Toilet Organization, the WTO. It sounds like the World Trade Organization. It's the same about big and small businesses. And most of the time it's talking about crap, but very good crap.
You're actually literally talking about crap.
Or literally.
Literally, yeah,
Sometimes
exactly.
physically.
Okay, we're see, having a bit of a trouble with the. Okay, everyone, let's see. We can see the overlays. Guys, could you check the better now? Okay, thank you, thank you. We're actually they're commenting live here on LinkedIn. So we have viewers also from where are you guys from? David, you're from Sweden, right? And let's see, Azerbaijan. Are you from? Where are you from today? Well, you probably there from there usually as well, but you can just add everybody add where you're from and say hi. Let me know if the picture isn't getting better. Have a look at YouTube as well. Maybe that one's better. Anyway, the Social Innovation Forum here. Just zoom that one so you see that as well. There. In Riyadh. What you did the keynote today.
Yes, I did.
What was that about?
So I talked a little bit mostly about emerging generations. I happen to, of course, work at New York University. So we spend a lot of time thinking about these emerging generations and what's happening and how the workforce looks different, and particularly how innovation looks different. So I talked about those troubling generations, the millennials, Gen Z, and the emerging alphas. I know, but you got to take them on. We got to figure out what we're doing. So I spent some time talking about some of the trends, what's happening in terms of the trends, particularly, as I said, in terms of innovation. And I'll just say this. The one area, of course, that we know that emerging generations are just super interested in is climate. Climate, how are we going to sustain ourselves? What is that going to look like? And they have some very innovative ideas about what we should be doing to make that happen. So I know that Jack has written an article on the 7 C's. So I'll just say two of the C's right now: collaboration and curiosity. And if we don't have that, and we're not working with our emerging generations, so let me just say that when I say generations, if you're over 30 or 35, you're old. You're just old, okay? So you need to be working with people younger than that.
Okay, good. Having that said, okay, cool. But you said 7.
Yes, 7 C's. So that's 7 C's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm really old. I'm 66. So
you're
I'm actually
double
nearly going
yeah.
to die, but it's okay. I'm still alive, so I'm talking to you. So you have the curiosity, courage, compassion, commitment, communication, calmness, and you need to also be humble. So if you are able to have all these human skill, you are doing things that the AI cannot do because it is a higher level of intelligence rather than you can calculate or compute or drive a forklift. it's useless. You're all going to lose your job. But if you are able to feel, you cannot be a better robot. So you have to be a better human being.
I thought we said we were going to try and keep this light and airy here. This conversation. We had a wonderfully cynically optimistic conversation overnight. We were talking about where we are in the future and what to do. But you were talking about the two most important things that you were talking about: collaboration,
Yes.
but that goes for everyone.
That goes for everyone. And I will add to Jack C's, one of those C's that we really emphasize is co-creation. So this collaboration is really about how do we collaborate together. But co-creation is how do we create together?
Yeah.
And literally, how do we create new technologies? How do we create not just better robots, but better, exactly as Jack said, better humans? And critically get our leaders, right? And I spend a lot of time thinking about leadership, particularly for the emerging generations. That's what I teach. And so, how are we going to have leaders prepared for all of the challenges, both positive and negative?
But how do you then? I mean, okay, let's stay there, and then we'll
Yes.
talk about how do you then prepare these younger generations for these challenges? I mean, what do you teach them? What do you get them to practice on? Or
So I'll take another C, critical engagement. Critically engaged. What we know is that we're saturated with a lot of information. We are talking about this earlier at lunch, right? We're saturated with social media. We're saturated with emails. Many of us have multiple accounts, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all of it. And so what we need is strategic communication and strategic skills where people can actually critically examine the materials as opposed to just being overwhelmed by them. So we teach leaders, how do you look? How do you examine? How do you strategically then look at materials to figure out what are the trends? What is actually happening? Because if you can't actually read, to go back to what Jack's saying, right?
Yep.
Robots can't read. You got to be a better human.
But that again. Now I'm sort of jumping onto a current theme, which is the whole chat GDP thing.
Yes.
When it comes to,
yes.
I mean, critically looking at what comes out and saying, hey, is this actually true or not? Or not just taking things for, it came off the internet, so it must be true.
That's right.
Which suddenly is turning into not.
That's exactly right. And Chat GPT changes the game, right? It
Yeah.
changes the game in terms of, right. And what I've seen, even for our students who want to write papers with Chat GPT,
Yeah.
that's fine. That's fine, actually. I mean, I know lots of professors will disagree with me, but over time, we're going to have to integrate these technologies. But to go back to Jack's point, we have to integrate those technologies with critical lenses.
Indeed.
And that's where you just can't absorb everything that a robot produces for you, particularly about art history for something, right?
Yeah.
Art history is not just about the paintings on the wall, it's also about the emotional experience. It's about how we're engaging with that art. You know, Da Vinci and all of those people, the test of time is not just because they were robots. It's about the feeling that emerges from that. And that's the kind of critical thing.
Well,
you can't teach a robot in the same way.
Well, that's interesting because I know that for a fact that Jack, you've been working with a subject which was, I mean, in a sense, controversial or at least stigmatized, or you don't talk about it, even though it's not like we don't do it,
Yes.
right? How have you sort of approached that subject?
So I felt that anything that is unspoken is actually newsworthy. So if you can't talk about shit, it means that I can conquer the media with it. And so how can you say it in such a way that it's not rude or embarrassing? So I add humor. And the moment people can laugh at it, they listen to me. So I have a completely different philosophy about the changing the world. Because it's toilet, I have to use this strategy of letting go. That means I don't control. I let everybody take the subject of toilets and take it and solve the problem. For example, there's about 40% of the world don't have a toilet, like 2.5 billion people. So that's 22 years ago. Now, 22 years later, 2.5 billion people have toilet, but the population has grown another 2 billion. So now 2 billion people don't have toilet, but the percentage has reduced from 40% to 25. So it's very successful. If I were to start building toilet, I probably built 50,000 toilets over the last 23 years. But by creating a movement, not a bowel movement, but something like that,
You know it.
Everybody take
Got
action,
that one.
and then they take it into their own hands,
Yes, indeed.
literally, and the government.
Yeah, but we don't want people taking shit into our own hands.
Yeah, but
Not literally.
but politicians,
Sorry.
they realize that if I talk about toilet and all the media writes about it every year, around 2 billion readers. So then they say I can win election on this. So Jack, come along, and we hosted a lot of World Toilet Summit every year, in Sao Paulo, in Brazil, in Beijing, in Philadelphia, in Durban. And then they win election, promising people toilet. And so the revolution happened because the collective selfishness became selflessness.
Yeah, and you have. I mean, you have actually created a national holiday, not a national holiday, but a world day, right?
The United Nations World Toilet Day.
The United Nations World Toilet Day. That's a
Yes.
big thing. That's a huge thing.
Yes, and it's our founding day.
Yeah.
And when we first started, we say this is World Toilet Day. And 13 years later, 193 countries of the UN General Assembly unanimously signed to say we will henceforth adopt World Toilet Organization Founding Day as the official UN day. Do you know how many people we employ? 2%. And we create a global
That's
movement.
fantastic.
And
Well done, sir.
we've got no money, no power, no authority, but we change the world.
Yes, indeed.
Collaboration on
Yeah, but that's. I mean, I like that because I like. Let's stay with that line because you don't. I mean, you can change the world with determination, with intention, and with focus. And we talked about before with having a long-term focus and trying to actually not we were talking about politics every 3 4 years, but with a long-term vision and trying to it's perseverance. Every entrepreneur, perseverance, that.
resilience,
Yes, resilience, of course.
ability to recover.
Yes, ability to recover. Fantastic. Yes, you're speaking tomorrow at the
Yes.
conference.
You have to want it so badly that you can run on an empty tank, and the car will still drive although there's no more petrol. And that is the spirit of enterprise. If you want something, really want it, the world will conspire to help you.
Indeed. And if you yeah, but this is good though, because this is a lot. This is I know we're playing mind games here, but I meet so many people who mentally perceive the world as conspiring against themselves.
No.
And they're blaming the world for things that go wrong. And it's but it's
then your space closes.
it does.
narrow
Yes,
up.
indeed.
But if you think everybody love you, you don't have to find out. You just believe everybody love you. Your consciousness open.
Yeah.
Everyone is helping.
If you believe that everyone wants to collaborate with you, if you believe that everyone wants to create better, then you can move into those spaces.
It is. I mean, I love going to conferences like this because I get to meet crazy people like this. But in this old cliche of the pay it forward mentality, if you open every meeting with a person saying, "What can I help you with today?" And if everybody does that, we get the upward spiral because everybody's actually actively looking to help each other instead of saying, "I wonder what these people can help me with today." And then you get this closing down because it's always sort of
transactional.
Yeah, exactly. It becomes transactional. And we need to move there.
Well, that's what goes back to what Jack was saying about humility. You don't put yourself first. You put the project first. You put the ideas first, and then people can collaborate and come together around that.
Yeah.
You're inviting people to go to a beautiful future. You're not asking them to join you. If they join you, it's your ego problem. They don't like it. But if they go there and you're with them, they're happy.
But again, this is. I know it's a fine balance there. But what you're just saying now as well is the difference between the entrepreneur that thinks that it's all about me and I have to get people to follow me, and the entrepreneur that can actually tell a story about a future that you want to reach.
That's
And it's a miles the difference between those two.
That's miles of difference. And you need, and part of, right, teaching those skills is how do you tell a story? How do you tell the story about the future that brings others into that story? And that is not a robot story.
I must say that I didn't have any expectations. I didn't know what to expect when I came to this conference. And I sat down, and the first session was starting to go, and I had the thing in the ear with the translation. I was fascinated with how far they're trying to push the boundary of actually social innovation. They're going all in on this thing, and I'm happy that they invited you as well, so I get to meet you. This is great. This is great. Hi everyone. I'm not David. Commenting on your thing there about the AI specialists that are now discussing when the AIs hallucinate and the convincing about wrong answers. Yeah, we're reading a lot about that now. A lot of I think that many people. I think the guys in was it one of the companies were kind of sort of distraught that they released everything a bit too early because they were they were chased into releasing it.
Google.
Because I didn't say they might not be ready yet, but hell, it's we're trying things out. We're trying things out. So, what are you looking forward to the rest of the conference?
I think one thing we need to
Yes.
share with the audience is that there's a revolution going on in Saudi Arabia, and women are now able to talk to men freely. And there's no more, the burqa is optional, and things are liberalizing, and it's becoming a very normal country. And I think this is very good news.
In fact, one of the things that I talked about is the $2.0 trillion across the MENA region, which of course many of the leaders here already know about. And so tapping into that and really thinking about the future. What we also know is that surprisingly, and surprising to many people in the West, is that in several countries within the MENA region, women are outproducing men in science, technology, engineering, and math. In other words, educated at high levels, etc. There are lots of reasons for this, but it's one of the ways that we can really start to think about when we talk about co-creation and global collaboration, right? Where we see in the West some of the depression of women in science, technology, engineering, and math. If we have these global collaborations, we can begin to learn from one another and figure out what does that 2.0 trillion look like in terms of gender, and particularly thinking about employment, labor markets, and of course, if we think about new technologies and the innovations that if we think about the innovations that younger people can make across gender, that is going to be just amazing as well.
But that's something I'm seeing as well, is when it comes to not only the equality and the gender mix, but also the exactly what you said. The innovations are also shifting because we've had such a male-dominated innovative environment the last hundreds of years, and just the last 4 or 5 years, we're seeing a lot of innovations, a lot of inventions, and a lot of things coming out which are strictly for females, by females. We're talking about things like menopause. We're talking about the menstruation cycles and the birth control in a whole different way today than we were just 10 years ago.
And childcare, one of the most fascinating things to me about emerging generations also is, and this is a global sort of data that has been pulled, is that younger men, so men in younger generations, care about their families, and they actually want to be able to take care of their families in interesting ways that older generations weren't because of labor, labor markets, etc. So it's a very interesting change, not just for women, but for men as well. And so when I'm talking to, yes, I'm old too, David. And so when we're talking to people about what does that look like, right? I also say to men, you may think you're talking to your peer, who's your younger peer, but actually they're very different. They're emerging very differently than they were 20 years ago.
But I think that I'm not saying. I think it's
and that innovation,
indeed,
and they bring that to their innovation.
Indeed, and I think all these social constructs that we have, but be it gender equality or not, or the male female roles, and just as females might have sort of been forced or felt forced to, I need to do the home thing instead of the males have maybe also felt forced that I have to be the what's it called, the providing man at the household. I need to go to work, whereas I might have want to stay home and take care of the kids. I want to play with my kids. You go work.
This thing about in Saudi Arabia is that women has not been uh, free for a very long time, and suddenly you can unleash 50% of the population, all their entrepreneurial skill, all their intellectual quality and talents. And can you imagine you have 50% new talent pool in a country? Immediately you can grow. So the future is really very bright for
Very
Saudi
bright.
Arabia.
But that is also, I will bounce on that, and I will actually, not point the finger, but I will just say to other countries, well, any country, all countries, this country as well, is, all countries have some kind of marginalized part of the population that you don't think can contribute and that aren't either good enough or don't have a place for it. We've had, like in Sweden, we've had this, we were the country in Europe that received most Syrian,
Yes.
Syrian
Syria.
refugees.
Yes.
And I'm not saying it's a black and white thing, but in many cases, it's 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 some in the public opinion, it's a liability and a problem. And
Do you mind if I speak to that for just a second? One of the things I actually didn't say this earlier, but it's one of the things I say a lot. How we frame something is what we get. And so sometimes, and I see it with generations, but in this case with refugees, if we frame something as a problem, they often become our problem. But if we frame it as our asset or possibility or opportunity, then to go back to Jack's point, then that's envisioning opportunity, that's envisioning possibility, and then we can do that together. Right. And so there's this great work by a man by the name of Scott Page, and he talks about he's a mathematician and an economist, and he talks about that we really need to start thinking about bonuses and how we leverage these bonuses, particularly in complex economies and in complex social ecosystems. And to your point, global migration, refugees, we see this across the world, and how instead of framing as this is the problem we're confronting in our country, how do we think
So let
this
me
might
try
be
to frame this bonus.
new world?
Refugees are fundamentally entrepreneurs. Why? Because they're risk taker. Who would want to run away when it's easier to just stay at home? But when they run away, they lose everything. They go on a boat, which might not arrive. But when they arrive and they're not dead, that means you've got a live entrepreneur.
No,
And
but
that is an asset.
but this is so true, because I've met people in Sweden that have literally walked. They paddled in a small boat across a huge sea. They have walked through Europe, and they go, "Give me something to do. I want to build a new future for myself and my family."
Yes.
And if that's not an entrepreneur spirit, I have never seen an entrepreneur
That's
spirit.
exactly right.
So I mean, we need to utilize all of these people, and I think you said it really good before as well. We were having lunch, and you said that first and foremost we're actually all human beings.
Yes.
And then we have this idea
We're not
that
Republican or Democrats. We're
No.
human beings.
Exactly, and I think that that's something that we need to see beyond the whatever name tag we put on people,
Yes.
and see the person, because I think that any person that you get to know is a person. I don't know what's happening here. Okay. That's okay. Cool.
Right.
Anyway,
And we're more globally connected than we ever were. So we have to see one another in different ways than we have in the past. And that's that human part.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm going to New York. I heard that they're just shooting Asian. I hope that I don't get shot because I just like, I'm human.
We had a long discussion on the different preconceptions what people have about different countries, and we don't want to go there again.
Yes.
But anyway, I'm looking at the timer. It's the world's fastest half an hour. We're almost on 30 minutes. So I want to ask my dear guest, thank you for joining me today.
Yeah.
Wonderful to meet you. I'm so glad I got the opportunity to get here. Thank you for inviting me. Conference. And I'm speaking tomorrow, by the way. But I would not ask my guests here to any final words on social innovation and what you would want
Ladies
to,
first.
any messages for listeners in the world.
For social innovation, really, really think about co creation and collaboration outside of your box, outside of whatever your box is. Really think about how are you reframing and bringing in all of that new, all of that troubling, and being aspirational to think about what our future will look like.
Wonderful.
And as for me, I just want to tell you that you are going to die, because no matter how old you are, eventually you're going to die. And roughly, when are you going to die? You're going to die around 80, 85, 82, and you will die. So, before you die, it's better to do something useful for society and leave it better than you came, and forget about yourself. You're probably not going to get hungry, but you can help people. So if you want to learn how to help people, go Google Mr. Toilet, Jack Sim. You get lots of videos. You learn.
Love this guy. Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you.
Professor Jackson. Thank you so much, both of you. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Thanks for joining in. And bye for now. See you next week, 2:30 p.m. Innovation Fika.